The blood spread faster than I expected. Dark red against the pale cream rug the one Mom had imported from New Jersey after watching a holiday home tour. I was on my hands, knees throbbing, scalp warm and wet. I hadn't even stood up yet when she said it. "Not again, Emily. You always ruin holidays." Her voice didn't rise. It was worse, flat. Bored almost. Behind her the gravy boat sat untouched. Tyler was still yelling about politics. My father, stone-faced, stabbed his ham. No one looked my way. Except Mrs. Romero, the neighbor. She stood frozen by the door, one hand still holding the pecan pie she'd brought. "I'm gonna call someone," she whispered. I blinked, and my vision swam. The edge of the coffee table had caught me near the temple. I reached up, felt the warm stickiness across my hairline. My sweater, my favorite cranberry one, was soaked. "Don't be dramatic," Mom hissed as she stepped over me to adjust the candles. I laughed. I think I laughed. Short, sharp, borderline hysterical. Because once again, in a room full of witnesses, I was the problem. Never mind that Tyler had shoved me. Never mind that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. What mattered was that the carpet was stained, that the pie was getting cold, that the neighbors were watching. I sat upright slowly, my head spinning. Someone handed me a dish towel. I think it was Camille, Tyler's latest girlfriend. She couldn't meet my eyes. "I just asked him to lower his voice," I murmured. No one responded. Just the clink of silverware. A cough. Tyler laughing loud and careless. I stood, wobbled. Grabbed my purse with shaking fingers. Not a single person moved to stop me. As I opened the front door, I glanced back. Mom was already dabbing club soda into the rug. I walked into the night alone, blood drying at my hairline, cold air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't cry. I'd done that before. Tonight, I just whispered, "Not again." And I meant it. Would you fight back or walk away? Have you ever been blamed for your own pain? Where are you listening from? Tell me below. The next morning I stood in my kitchen staring at the same coffee maker I'd used for 8 years. Same chipped mug. Same sugar jar with the rusted lid. But everything felt off. I kept thinking about the way my mother leaned down to scrub the carpet like I'd dropped wine, not blood. The way my father didn't even glance up from his ham. The way no one had asked if I needed to go to urgent care except a woman who didn't share my last name. I ran a finger along the scar forming near my hairline. The skin stung. But not as much as the memory. I'd always been the quiet one. The helpful one. The daughter who took the calls at 2 a.m. when Mom forgot her meds, who paid Tyler's electric bill twice when he forgot to apply for assistance. The one who never made a scene. Until last night. When Mom started forgetting names in 2018, I stepped up. She didn't want a stranger helping with baths, so I moved my shifts around. I'd go straight from analyzing tissue samples to cutting crusts off her toast at 7 a.m. Tyler. He disappeared for weeks. Reappeared only when he needed a signature. Mom would cry when he was gone, but the second he stepped back and she glowed. "He's just lost," she told me once, folding his hoodie with a tenderness I hadn't seen in years. "You're strong, Emily. He needs more from us." More, that was the word she always used with me. Could you do more? Stay a little longer, pay this one bill, take her to the neurologist, cancel that work trip. And I did. Because somewhere in the noise, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd earn her love if I became useful enough. The townhome I lived in was modest. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, a backyard, barely big enough for a folding chair, but it was mine. I paid every cent on my own since the divorce. Greg, my ex-husband, had left after 5 years. He said I gave too much to my family and didn't know how to be a wife anymore. He wasn't wrong. Every photo on my walls was of me alone. Or of me and Mom. Never Tyler. Never Dad. Never the full family. Funny how I kept trying to piece together something that had never really existed whole. I pulled out the shoebox that lived in my hallway closet. Inside, copies of Mom's prescriptions. A receipt from the time Tyler charged $850 to her account at a vape shop. Old birthday cards with blank spaces where my name should have been. One check I'd written for $3. 200 when she needed her car repaired. None of this made sense in a spreadsheet. But it added up in silence. In resentment. That morning I found one more thing. An envelope wedged in between two electric bills. Inside a document dated August 2021. Revocation of shared beneficiary agreement. It had Mom's signature, but not her handwriting. And mine, the line where I used to be listed as co-beneficiary was crossed out in pen. There was no return address. My breath caught. I read it twice, 3 times. Then I grabbed my bag and drove straight to the memory care center where Nurse Cheryl still worked weekends. Cheryl had been our saving grace in 2020. She brought books for Mom to read aloud when her mind was still sharp enough to form sentences. She brought candles that didn't set off Mom's migraines. She noticed the things I didn't like when Mom started asking where Emily had gone. While I was sitting right there. When she saw me walk in, her eyes softened. "Rough Thanksgiving?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Do you remember August 2021? Around the time Mom signed off on that trust change." Her brow furrowed. "I do." That was when she forgot how to unlock her phone. I had to write her passcode on a post-it. I showed her the signature. "Does this look like hers?" She took a breath. "Number. Not even close." On the way home, I stopped by the grocery store. I bought a rotisserie chicken, a can of green beans, and a box of chamomile tea. I didn't know why, I just wanted to feel normal again. As I stood in line, I noticed a mother behind me. Her daughter was tugging at her sleeve, asking questions. The woman answered every one patient warm present. I turned away. Tried not to cry. Tried not to wonder what it would feel like to be seen like that. Back in my kitchen, I pulled out the old holiday sweater from the laundry basket. The cranberry one. Still stained with blood I couldn't get out, still folded the way I left it when I peeled it off. I placed it in a shoebox and labeled it in Sharpie "Never Again." Then I sat down, lit a candle, and opened a new folder on my laptop. Documentation, Phase 1. It was time. Has anyone ever dismissed your pain like it didn't matter? Have you ever uncovered a truth no one wanted you to see? You can tell your story below. I'm listening. The Monday after Thanksgiving, no one called. Not Tyler. Not my mother. Not even a text from Camille to ask if the cut on my forehead needed stitches. At first, I checked my phone every hour. Then I turned it face down and shoved it in a drawer. The silence said more than words ever could. Work helped a little. My shift started at 6 a.m. and by 6:07 I was elbow-deep in pathology slides and auto-analyzer readouts. The hum of the lab machines. The smell of formalin. The rhythm of tiny tasks with clear right answers. No noise, no guessing, no family. Still something in me had shifted. I kept picturing Mom crouched over the rug, club soda in one hand, rage in the other. I kept hearing Tyler's laugh as I clutched my bleeding scalp. And underneath it all, one question pulsed like a low-grade fever. How long have I been disappearing? That night, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat cross-legged on the floor with the old metal filing box. It held everything from expired car insurance forms to greeting cards I couldn't throw away. At the very bottom was a manila envelope I hadn't touched in years. Inside, photocopies of Mom's durable power of attorney, her living will, and an older version of the family trust from 2017. My name was on every page. Listed beside Tyler's, equal. I pulled out the document I'd found last week, the 2021 revocation. The handwriting didn't match, the notary seal was smudged. Tyler's name was now listed alone. A familiar ache rose in my throat, but I didn't cry. Instead, I took photos. Front, back, close-up. I emailed them to myself. Subject: Phase 1, Evidence. The next day, I stopped by the office of Diane Monroe, Mom's old estate attorney. I didn't have an appointment, didn't even know if she still worked there. The receptionist raised an eyebrow at the sight of me, still in scrubs, hair pulled back, tired eyes. "I'm not sure she's in." Then a voice echoed from down the hallway. Emily Hartwell. I turned. There she was. Short silver bob burgundy blazer, eyes sharp as ever. Come in, she said. I was wondering when I'd see you. Diane's office smelled like vanilla and dust. Her bookshelf was stacked with titles like Trust Law for Nonprofits and Disinheritance Disputes, a Practical Guide. She waved me into a leather chair and folded her hands. I assume this isn't a social visit. I placed the documents on her desk. This was pushed through last year. I only found out recently. My mother's signature doesn't look right. Diane didn't speak for a moment. Then she leaned forward, pulled out a magnifier, and examined the page. She was already showing significant memory loss in 2021, she said quietly. We'd stopped letting her sign solo by then. So this isn't legal. She exhaled. Depends on what Tyler told the notary. And whether coercion can be proven. But if you're asking me if this feels ethical, no. It doesn't. That night I stayed up past midnight scanning documents. I created folders, timelines, spreadsheets. I highlighted dates, flagged names, sorted receipts. It was almost mechanical, like I was prepping a report for a clinical trial. Only this time the subject was my family. 3 days later, I got a call from Aunt Merle. She always played the peacemaker. Called me her little pumpkin growing up. But that warmth had long cooled into distance. Hi, Em, she began, chipper and brisk. Just checking in. I waited. She didn't ask about my head, didn't mention Thanksgiving. Just went straight to the point. Your mom said you were upset. I told her not to worry. You've always been a little sensitive, haven't you? My mouth went dry. Merle Tyler shoved me into a coffee table. I was bleeding. Pause. Well, you know how he gets. You should have just walked away. Walked away. From my own mother's living room. I hung up without saying goodbye. That weekend, I visited the old storage unit my parents had rented 10 years ago. The key was still in Mom's drawer, taped to the back of a Valentine's Day card. Inside the unit, old tax boxes, yellowed Christmas cards, one rusted bike, and a bin labeled Emily. College, med forms. I dragged it out and opened it. Inside were scraps of my 20s, acceptance letter from Baylor, pay stubs from my first tech job, a thank you card from Mom with one sentence. Thanks for the check. Hope you're not working too much. But buried beneath it all was a photo. Me at age 10 blowing out birthday candles. Tyler standing behind me holding the edge of my shirt. The moment before he yanked me backward, I remember crying. Mom took the cake away that year. Said I ruined it by making a scene. I stared at the photo, now stunned. Even when the evidence was in her hands, she'd blamed me. Later that night, I pulled out my old work laptop. It still had a copy of our shared family calendar from 2020. Doctor's appointments. Grocery runs. Emily picks up meds repeated 12 times that spring. Tyler's name 0 entries. By Sunday morning, I had 3 folders. 1. Financial inconsistencies. 2. Caregiving documentation. 3. Historical emotional pattern. That last one was the hardest. I titled it that way so I wouldn't label it what it truly was. Emotional abuse. I didn't feel angry, not yet. I felt awake. Like I was finally standing up in a room I didn't realize I'd been lying down in for years. No one else had changed. But I had, and I wasn't going to disappear quietly this time. I didn't plan to confront him that day. I'd only stopped by Mom's house to drop off groceries. Oat milk, ibuprofen, the cereal she still liked, the one with the cartoon bee on the box. She wasn't there, at least not in the living room. But Tyler was. Sprawled on the recliner, television on socks, dirty, a beer bottle, half balanced on the armrest like a prop. He didn't even glance up. You're early. I set the bag on the counter. You were supposed to take her to her neurology appointment this morning. She said she didn't feel like going. She forgot about it, I snapped. You were supposed to remind her. He waved a hand like he was swatting a fly. Chill. I'll take her next time. I stared at him, really stared. The same man who once stole $600 from Dad's wallet and blamed me. The same man who got arrested in 2016 and made Mom take the blame because she'd understand. The same man who shoved me into furniture less than a week ago. And yet here he sat. Comfortable. Protected. Still the favorite. I know about the trust, I said, that got his attention. He turned the television down but didn't mute it. So Mom's signature on that 2021 update isn't hers. He rolled his eyes. You're reaching. No, Tyler, I have documents. Dates. Her attorney said she wasn't competent to sign on her own at that time. He stood up slowly, beer still in hand. She was lucid. You weren't around, remember, I handled everything. Like always. I laughed, sharp, bitter. You mean when you disappeared for 6 months and came back with a new car you couldn't explain? He stepped closer. Careful, Em. You always make things worse when you spiral. That word, spiral. He'd used it when I cried during Dad's stroke recovery. Used it when I asked why he never showed up to Mom's chemo sessions. Used it when I bled on the carpet. It was never his rage. Never his negligence. It was always my reaction. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printout. Do you deny that's your handwriting next to her name? He didn't look. You're obsessed. You always have been. You think keeping tabs and organizing files makes you better than the rest of us. No, I said. It made me the only one holding this family together. He smirked. And look how well that worked out. Flashback. Age 16. Thanksgiving. Mom burning the turkey again, blaming the oven. Dad pacing. Tyler, high eyes glassy, knocking over the cranberry sauce. I asked him to sit down gently. He cursed. I flinched. The plate slipped from my hand. It shattered. Mom turned and slapped me. No one said a word. Later that night, I found a note under my pillow. Tyler's handwriting. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would notice. I kept that note. Still have it. Not because I believed it, but because deep down I did. Back in the kitchen now, Tyler was grinning. You gonna cry again? He sneered. You always were theatrical. I stepped closer. You took from her. You forged her name. You made her change everything while she was sick. She agreed. She couldn't remember how to microwave soup, Tyler. He didn't answer, didn't deny. Just chuckled and grabbed his keys off the counter. I'm going out. Let me know when you're done playing detective. He walked past me like I was air. I stood in that empty kitchen for a long time. The smell of old lemon cleaner, the hum of the refrigerator, the slight crack in the tile by the sink where I'd once slipped carrying Dad's meds. And on the fridge held by a magnet shaped like a cat, a shopping list written in Mom's shaky scrawl. Eggs, toilet paper. Don't forget Emily. I stared at the last line until my eyes blurred. Later that night, I dug through a digital folder I hadn't opened in 2 years. It was a backup from the health tracker app I'd used to log Mom's symptoms. There it was. A note dated the 12th of August 2021. Mom called me Sarah today, asked if Emily still lived with us. Forgot she'd moved out 6 years ago. The same week Tyler filed the new trust paperwork. I added the screenshot to the folder. Titled it Cognitive Incompetence, Time of Signing. I created a subfolder Possible Forgery. And then another Emotional Neglect Incidents. Inside it I wrote Thanksgiving 2022. Shoved into coffee table. Blamed for bleeding. No apology, no help. Carpet cleaned before I was. I emailed everything to myself. I CC'd a new email account I'd created that morning. Private. Offline. Encrypted. I titled it Project Never Again. Sometimes you don't realize what justice looks like until you stop needing to be loved. Until you realize silence was never keeping the peace, it was keeping you small. I closed my laptop. Turned off the lights. And let the quiet hold me, not like punishment this time, but like armor. The Christmas card came 3 days early. It was from Aunt June, Mom's sister in Dallas. Inside was a photo of her family smiling in matching red sweaters, standing in front of a fireplace that looked professionally staged. Below it, a handwritten note: "Hope you're doing better now. Let's try not to let little things blow up family time next year, okay? Holidays are meant for joy." Joy. I stared at that word until it blurred. Later that evening, I sat across from Nurse Cheryl at a small cafe just off I-10. She'd offered to meet after her shift. "I can't testify officially," she warned gently, "but I can tell you what I saw." I nodded. "I'm not asking you to choose sides. I just need someone to say I'm not crazy." She sipped her tea, then looked at me straight. "You're not crazy, Emily. You've just been the only one paying attention." That night, I called Cousin Laura, Dad's niece, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. "I don't know," she said hesitantly after I told her what had happened. "Maybe Tyler made a mistake, but sometimes your energy is hard. You make things heavy." "Do you think I deserved it?" I asked quietly. "The way they treated me. The shove." She sighed. "Number. But you always make everything sound worse than it is." Worse than it is. That was the phrase Mom used when I came home crying at 16 after a teacher accused me of cheating. Turned out Tyler had stolen my notes and passed them off as his own. "But Mom," she said, "don't be dramatic. It's just school. Let it go." That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled out an old spiral notebook, the one I used to keep by my bed during on-call shifts. Instead of writing to-do lists, I made 2 columns. What I remember. What they told me happened. I remember falling down the stairs at 11. They said I was clumsy. I remember Tyler hiding my stuffed rabbit and laughing when I cried. They said I was too sensitive. I remember crying when Mom forgot my birthday. She said I always made things about me. Page after page, I filled it. Flashbacks came like static. Flickers of rooms I'd walked through 1,000 times without knowing the weight they carried. There was one memory I hadn't thought about in years. I was 9. Thanksgiving again. Tyler had dared me to go out into the garage and shut the door behind me. He said it would be funny. It was pitch black. I screamed. Kicked the door, banged with both fists. No one came. I don't know how long I stayed there. Eventually, I curled up next to the water heater and whispered to myself that it would all be okay. That Mom would find me. That she'd be mad at him. When the door finally opened, it was Dad. He looked confused. Said I shouldn't play where I wasn't supposed to. Mom laughed. Said I was always causing drama on holidays. They didn't even scold Tyler. I remember his face smug, untouched. That night, I threw up in my room from the panic. No one asked why. I sat in my kitchen at 3:14 a.m., the house silent. Only the sound of the fridge humming and my pen scratching paper. I added one more line to the list. I remember being locked in the garage. They said I made it up. In the morning, I took down all the framed photos from my hallway. One by one. Not out of rage, but because I realized I wasn't in most of them. Vacations, Christmases, birthdays. My face missing, cropped or pushed to the edge. There were more photos of Tyler and his football trophies than of me graduating college, and I was the one who sent Mom those prints. I laid them on the floor like puzzle pieces. Studied them as if they were someone else's life. Was I ever really seen? Was I ever part of this family, or just the scaffolding holding it up? No one texted. No one called. Not even to ask if I'd come by for Christmas Eve dinner. And for the first time, the silence didn't crush me. It clarified me. That evening, I opened a new file on my laptop, living record Emily Hartwell. No legalese, no dramatics, just the truth. Typed plainly, cleanly, chronologically. Dates of unpaid caregiving. Texts from Mom thanking me for picking up prescriptions. Call logs of me checking in daily. Receipts for every grocery run, every pharmacy pickup, every medical supply I bought with my own paycheck. The night I was blamed for ruining another holiday while blood still ran down my face. I wrote it all. Not for revenge. Not for pity. but so no one, including me, could rewrite it again. Sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's sitting at a kitchen table in silence writing your name into your own story. Sometimes it's choosing not to call the people who never called you back. It started with a folder. Blue, plastic. Snapped at the corners. I slid it across the oak desk toward Jeanette Palmer, attorney at law. She was in her 50s, wore steel-rimmed glasses, and a gray bob that didn't move when she turned. Her office smelled like eucalyptus and toner. She flipped the folder open, glanced at the first page, then looked up. "This is meticulous." I nodded. "It's just the beginning." Jeanette had come highly recommended. She'd handled elder fraud, disputed wills, power of attorney abuse, and she didn't ask stupid questions like, "Are you sure this isn't a family misunderstanding?" She skimmed my documents in silence. Photos, screenshots, notarized dates, voicemail logs, caregiving receipts. A signed affidavit from Nurse Cheryl, unofficial but damning. At the bottom was the file labeled Cognitive Decline, Time of Signing. "You're alleging that your brother coerced your mother into changing the family trust while she was cognitively impaired," she said. "I'm not alleging," I replied. "I'm proving it." We met twice a week after that. Her paralegal helped me draft a timeline of every medical appointment from 2020 to 2022. We pulled prescriptions, MRI results, neuropsych evaluations. And each night when I got home, I lit the same lavender candle and added one more detail to my digital archive. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about clarity. I reviewed old texts I'd once ignored. "Just let Tyler handle it, he's already overwhelmed. We don't need your constant oversight. If you'd been more present, maybe Mom wouldn't be so anxious." Each one landed like a breadcrumb leading back to the same house. Same story. Same gaslight. On a rainy Tuesday, I went to the county records office. There it was. A quitclaim deed filed quietly in late 2021 transferring partial ownership of Mom's home to Tyler. Signed by her. And notarized. By a woman who later lost her license for fraud. I printed 3 copies, one for Jeanette, one for my archive, and one that I placed gently in a red folder labeled Final Strike. The deeper I dug, the clearer the map became. There were patterns. Intentional delays in communication. Financial moves made just before doctor visits. Tyler knew when Mom was most confused, and that's when he acted. He didn't steal in the dark. He waited until the lights were flickering and no one was watching. Except me. I called the financial advisor listed on the 2017 trust. He was polite until I mentioned the 2021 revocation. Then his tone changed. "We were told you were no longer involved, that you'd moved, didn't want the responsibility." By who? He hesitated. Tyler. Of course. At home, I opened my old cedar box. The one I'd kept letters and photos in since college. I pulled out the birthday card from 2020. "Thanks for taking Mom to the ER. I owe you." Tyler's handwriting. I scanned it. Filed it under contradictions. Some days the grief would creep in. Not for what they did, but for how long I'd tried to earn something that was never going to be given. Love shouldn't have to be proved in spreadsheets. But here I was. 3 weeks into building my case, I stopped by Mom's memory care unit. Not to talk, just to see. She was sitting by the window, humming to herself, tearing napkins into tiny squares. Her hair was thinner now, cheeks sunken. But she still wore her favorite teal cardigan, the one I gave her on her 70th birthday. I didn't go in, didn't wave. I just stood behind the glass and watched. And when she looked up just for a second, her face softened. She mouthed something I couldn't hear. I told myself it was my name. Then I turned and walked away. The next morning, I texted Jeanette, ready to move forward. "Let's make it official." She filed a motion to freeze the disputed assets. Submitted preliminary evidence to challenge the validity of the trust alteration. Filed for inquiry into potential elder coercion. A formal notice was served to Tyler's address 2 days later. I wasn't there when he got it, but I imagined the look on his face. Smugness cracking. Power shifting. 2 days later, he texted me, "What the hell are you doing? You really want to destroy what's left of this family?" I didn't answer. A second message followed. "You think this makes you strong? You'll always be the problem, Em." I screenshotted both. Filed them under emotional manipulation attempts. Then blocked his number. On my walk that evening, the air smelled like burnt leaves and early winter. A neighbor was stringing lights on their porch. A golden retriever trotted past me, tail wagging. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt solid, accounted for. Seen. Even if only by myself. Back home, I made tea in my favorite mug, the blue one with the crack that spidered near the handle. I didn't try to hide the crack anymore. It was part of the story. So was I. Has silence ever protected someone else's comfort but cost you your peace? Have you ever stopped chasing approval and chosen justice instead? Tell me below. You're not alone anymore. Subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more true stories of justice, healing, and quiet empowerment after 40. It was a Tuesday when I printed the letters. One for the probate court, one for Tyler's legal representative, and one for myself because holding it made everything feel real. I used heavy paper. Cream-colored. No frills, just weight. The letter opened like this. This is not about revenge. This is about record correction. Simple, direct. Unemotional. I didn't want pity. I wanted accountability. Jeanette reviewed the evidence line by line. "This is more than enough to open a formal review," she said. "Do you want to request a hearing date?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. Back at home, I made tea and opened the folder I'd been building for months. Final strike. Inside, the forged trust amendment. Medical proof of cognitive impairment. Nurse Cheryl's statement. Handwritten cards from Tyler acknowledging I was Mom's caregiver. The deed transfer notarized by a woman now under federal investigation. Screenshots of manipulative texts. Expense logs going back 5 years. Each page a brick in the wall of truth I was building. Not to punish them, but to protect myself. I emailed scanned copies to Jeanette. Then I created a second drive. Offline. Encrypted. I labeled it Living Record. I placed it in a fireproof safe under my bed. That night I slept 8 hours straight for the first time in years. The next morning I walked through my apartment like I was meeting it again for the first time. The hallway light flickered. I fixed it. My fridge was nearly empty. I made a grocery list. I opened the windows. Let air in. Let the past out. Then I reached for the shoebox. The one that held the cranberry sweater I'd bled through. I pulled it out, folded it neatly, placed it inside a new cardboard box. On top, I added one thing. A photo of me at 7 years old smiling in a school play costume. I labeled the box, "Do not return to sender." I took it to the storage unit that afternoon and left it behind. That weekend I baked a peach pie. Not for anyone else. Just for me. The crust burned slightly, but I didn't care. I ate it warm in the quiet of my kitchen, one slice at a time. On Monday, Jeanette emailed me the court date. 3 weeks from now. 10:00 a.m. Probate Courtroom, 4A. Formal petition to challenge the trust, revision, and asset transfer. "Are you ready to testify?" she asked. I stared at the email for a long time. Then typed 2 words, "I'm ready." That night, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I played music. Just one song. Soft jazz. The kind Mom used to hum before dinner. Then I cleaned the entire apartment from top to bottom. Not out of anxiety, but because I wanted to make space for something new. I bought a new sweater. Blue, soft cotton, no stains. No memory attached to it. I placed it carefully in my closet next to a pair of flats I hadn't worn since the divorce. Maybe I'd wear both to court. I called Nurse Cheryl and told her the date. She paused. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "Yes," I said, "but not just for me." That weekend I wrote a letter I never sent. To my mother. You may never remember what happened. But I do, and for the first time, I'm not pretending it didn't. I deleted Tyler's contact, blocked every number associated with him, muted Camille on social media. I removed my name from the family group chat. Then I opened a new note on my phone and wrote, "Family is not who gaslights your reality. Family is not who blames your blood on the carpet. Family is who shows up when no one else will." The day before the hearing, I took a walk through Memorial Park. It was chilly, leaves crunched beneath my boots. The sky was low and gray, perfect for clarity. I sat on a bench near the duck pond and whispered to myself, "You're not the problem, you were the witness. And now you're the record keeper." Back home, I gathered everything. The final strike folder, my ID, the original trust copy, court letter, a photo of Mom and me from when she was still smiling at me without confusion. I placed them in a black canvas bag. Then I placed one last item, a white porcelain teacup, the one that never cracked, the one I bought to replace the one they shattered. It would stay in my bag, close, not as proof, but as memory. The night before court, I stood in front of my mirror. No bruises now, no red eyes, just me, alive, whole, unapologetically clear. Courtroom 4A was smaller than I expected. No mahogany walls, no soaring ceilings. Just beige carpet humming fluorescence and a judge who looked tired before we even began. Jeanette sat beside me, calm, with two binders and a highlighter tucked behind her ear. I wore the new blue sweater, the one without history. Tyler entered late, wearing a blazer too tight at the shoulders, hair slicked back, smug as ever. He didn't look at me. Good. The judge opened with a brief explanation. "We were here to challenge the validity of the 2021 Trust Amendment and property transfer on grounds of cognitive incapacity and suspected coercion." Simple on paper. But nothing about this was simple. Jeanette opened our case. She laid out the documents one by one. Clear, unemotional, clinical. Medical evidence of Mom's cognitive decline starting 2020, psychiatric evaluations showing progressive short-term memory loss. The August 2021 note from my health app, "Mom called me Sarah today." The notary who had since lost her license. The property deed transfer. Tyler's texts. His own handwritten card. "Thanks for covering Mom's bills." Photos of me at every appointment. Statements from Nurse Cheryl. The judge nodded, listened, took notes. Then came Tyler's lawyer. A slick young man with a toothy smile and too much cologne. He leaned on the word estranged. Emily had emotionally distanced herself. Tyler was the only consistent support in 2021. Mom had every right to change her mind. Family matters are often messy but not malicious. Then Tyler spoke. He looked at the judge, not at me. "I took care of her. I handled the house, the finances, the errands. Emily was around sometimes, but not enough. She never liked dealing with stress." Stress. He made it sound like I'd left because I didn't want to bother, not because I was bleeding on the carpet. Jeanette stood up. She said one thing. "If caregiving is defined by presence, by sacrifice, by record, then the documents speak louder than sentiment." And then she did something I hadn't expected. She handed me the clicker. "You're ready," she whispered. I stepped forward. My heart pounded, but my hands didn't shake. I clicked the first slide, a photo of Mom and me in 2020 sitting in a doctor's office. Her holding my hand. Her eyes confused. My calendar app in the corner, neurology, 2 p.m. Then the document showing Tyler filed the trust amendment 3 days later. The grocery receipt I paid for that same week. The voicemail, "Where's Emily? I don't want to go with him." The email from the financial advisor stating Tyler told them I'd moved away. The final slide was simple, a scanned note. Tyler's handwriting, 1,999. "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would notice." Silence. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Hartwell, do you deny writing this?" Tyler scoffed. I was a kid. And last Thanksgiving, the judge asked. What happened? Tyler shifted. That was a misunderstanding. She overreacted. I spoke finally. I bled onto the carpet. My mother cleaned the rug before checking on me. Still silence. I swallowed hard. This isn't about a fight over money. It's about being erased. Outside the courtroom, I found a bench and sat down. The cool air hit my cheeks. Jeanette sat beside me quiet. Inside, the judge reviewed. 30 minutes passed. Then the bailiff opened the door. The judge is ready to rule. We stood as the judge read the decision. The 2021 amendment was voided. The quitclaim deed deemed invalid. All assets reverted to the original 2017 agreement, naming both heirs equally. But Mom's power of attorney would be transferred to a neutral third party due to family dispute. Custody of decisions removed from Tyler. Jeanette squeezed my hand under the table. I didn't cry. Not yet. Tyler's face as we exited wasn't angry. It was hollow. He didn't look at me, didn't speak. Just walked past like a man who'd been seen too clearly. I stood on the courthouse steps. Sunlight hitting my face. One breeze. One breath. Inside me something unlocked. Not loud. Not sharp. Just clean. Back at home, I changed into sweatpants. Took off the sweater, hung it neatly. I opened the fireproof safe. Took out the porcelain teacup, poured myself chamomile. Saturday at the kitchen table. And whispered I wasn't too sensitive. I was just the only one feeling anything. The apartment smelled like lemon and something warm. I'd left the oven on, forgot I was baking peach muffins. Not because anyone was coming over, not to fill silence. Just because I wanted to. I moved slower now. Not from exhaustion, but because for the first time in years there was no fire behind me. Only stillness. Mom was placed in a new care facility a month after the hearing. Smaller, gentler. More light through the windows. They let her keep the teal cardigan. The one I gave her years ago, the last gift she remembered. I visit once a week. Sometimes she calls me Emily, sometimes she doesn't, but I go anyway. Because I'm not there to be seen. I'm there to bear witness to the woman she used to be. And quietly, that's enough. I boxed up the final strike folder last week. Labeled it, dated it, then slid it into storage next to my high school yearbooks. It's not gone, but it no longer sits on my nightstand. I don't need the proof anymore, I lived it. One morning I opened the email account I hadn't checked in months. The one I used to archive everything. There was a message. Subject line, just in case you ever want to talk. From Nurse Cheryl. Attached a photo. It was of me and Mom. Taken before everything frayed. I was feeding her orange slices. She was laughing. I don't remember the moment, but I believed it happened. That mattered more. Sometimes I wake up and reach for my phone out of habit. Waiting for a message from someone who never cared enough to send one. But then I breathe. Stretch. And walk to the window instead. Outside, my little planter boxes are starting to bloom. I don't remember planting anything, but something must have taken root anyway. A few weeks ago, I started writing again. Not in legal terms. Not in court language. Just letters. To myself. You are not too much. You are not the problem. You don't have to keep earning your place. I don't send them anywhere. I just write them. And reread them when my hands start shaking again. I bought a new rug for the living room. Not because the old one was stained. But because I deserved something soft to step on that had no history of blood. It's gray. Plush. And only mine. Mom doesn't remember the carpet. She doesn't remember that day. And I've stopped needing her to. Last week, a woman from the caregiving center approached me. She'd heard about my case. I just wanted to say, thank you, she said, eyes misty. Not all of us get to speak. I didn't have words, so I nodded. Sometimes quiet acknowledgement feels louder than applause. In a small wooden box by my window, I keep two things now. The porcelain teacup. A note I wrote to myself on the back of an old grocery list. You didn't ruin the holidays, you just stopped pretending they were whole. I don't host Thanksgiving, I don't go to Dallas. Or answer group texts that start with Happy Holidays, but this year I bought a single candle. Set it at the center of my small kitchen table, lit it before breakfast, and whispered, "Peace doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to last." Have you ever stopped chasing their love and chose your own peace instead? Tell me what healing looks like for you. I'm listening. You are not alone. Every ending can be a new beginning. Subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more real stories of quiet justice, healing, and empowerment after 40.